So the reading is from Ezra chapter 1, verse 5, through to chapter 2, verse 2. Ezra chapter 1, verse 5, through to chapter 2, verse 2.
Then the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, with all whose spirits God had moved, arose to go up and build the house of the Lord which is in Jerusalem. And all those who were with them encouraged them with articles of silver and gold, with goods and livestock and with precious things, besides all that was willingly offered. King Cyrus also brought out the articles of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from Jerusalem, and put in the temple of his gods. And Cyrus, king of Persia, brought them out by the hand of Mithridates, the treasurer, and counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. This is the number of them: 30 gold platters, 1,000 silver platters, 29 knives, 30 gold basins, 410 silver basins of a similar kind, and 1,000 other articles. All the articles of gold and silver were 5,400. All these Sheshbazzar took with the captives who were brought from Babylon to Jerusalem. Now these are the people of the province who came back from the captivity, of those who had been carried away, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away to Babylon, and who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, every one to his own city. Those who came with Zerubbabel were Jeshua, Nehemiah, Seraiah, Reliah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispah, Bigvai, Rehum, and Baanah, the number of the names of the people of Israel.
Okay, let's see. The account in Ezra, this is the final sermon that I'm doing in Ezra chapter 1. So it'll be just the closing words on it. I called it The Man with Two Names. I don't know if you can remember the Clint Eastwood serial, The Man with No Name, the cowboy films that he did. This man has got two names, and we'll find out a little bit more about him. But just to recap, thus far, Cyrus the king of Persia, and most of the community of Jewry, the Jewish community, most if not all, their hearts have been awakened. And they've been awakened, and whether it be the community of the Jews, or whether it be the king himself, the most powerful man in the world at that time, it seems that they were of one accord, of one heart, and of one purpose. And it was this, that they might build a house of God in Jerusalem, which is in Judah, we are told on several occasions in the chapter. Nearly 50,000 men volunteer with that spirit of voluntary. It talks about that, doesn't it? In the book of Psalms, in the day of your power, your people shall be willing, your people shall volunteer. And over 50,000 men volunteered to make this journey, taking their families with them, so probably the number was around about 100,000 all told, leaving Babylon for Jerusalem. I'm always amazed when we look in the Old Testament that we see glimpses of the New Testament, even in readings that you think have nothing at all to do with the New Testament at all. And yet here we see glimpses of Jesus, we see glimpses of the New Testament church, we see glimpses of God's ways and power working amongst the hearts of people. A king and a bunch of people that were brought captive are one of heart. Isn't it amazing what God can do? How we can bring people together of different social backgrounds, of no identity at all linked into each other than this, that the Lord has awakened their hearts, opened their hearts, uplifted their hearts. What a difference it makes when a church is filled with people that have been awakened, because there comes that sense of purpose, that sense of being one together, and the unity here is based around the building of the house of God. These volunteers that went forward, they were looking to leave Babylon for the ruined walls and city of Jerusalem. And yet even here we have a picture of confusion. Babylon gets its meaning or its understanding from the city of confusion. We use the word, don't it? Nothing but a Babel or a Babel. And it's the city of confusion. And they're leaving Babylon, the city of confusion, for Jerusalem, the city of peace. A lovely little way of looking at it, isn't it? Wonderful way of looking at it. Though Babylon might hold one of the great 7 wonders of the world in its hanging gardens, Jerusalem holds the God of all wonders within its ruined walls. And we have this wonderful picture of leaving darkness for light, of leaving confusion for peace, for leaving, well, a life that was void of God to a life that is filled with God. We read of Lydia in the New Testament, a lovely little way of putting it. It says, Lydia, whose heart the Lord opened. And then the next thing you find that she does, she opens her house. And here, with these new awakened souls, now some are going, but the majority are staying in Babylon. Their hearts have been awakened, yes, but there are ties in Babylon that are holding them up. And so the majority stay. And yet we find as soon as the hearts of the Jewish community is open, their hands open, their treasure house is open. And they give gifts to support the opening and the building of the temple up there in Jerusalem, and also for the travelers, these brave hearts that are leaving the safety and culture of Babylon over a 4-month journey and making their way to Jerusalem, which, as I said, was in ruined walls. They open their hands to them. We find that sometimes. When God moves sometimes, there are occasions when the people have been told, especially in the Old Testament, to stop giving. Your giving is too much. We've got more than enough. And so we find when Moses was about to build the tabernacle, the people congregated together and brought linen and cloths and silver and gold and jewels and wood and all the different things, and they had to be told to stop. In the days of Hezekiah, we are told there, the people collected monies for the priests, and the priests, he turned around and said, the priests have now more than enough. And so there's that extravagance, not foolishness, but extravagance of giving that comes with those that have awakened hearts. Well, these brave hearts, these pilgrims, who's going to lead them? Who's the character that's going to be the one that is going to lead them from Babylon up to Jerusalem and there begin and hopefully complete the work? First and foremost, he will have to be a man of good standing amongst his people. When Moses went back to Egypt, we're told in the New Testament that he did not fear Pharaoh. So his trembling, his nerves was not about facing Pharaoh. It's quite clear when you read the Old Testament account, his fears were based upon, the elders won't believe me. That's where the trouble lay as far as Moses was concerned. And so this man, whoever he is, to lead this second exodus, it would seem, from Babylon to Jerusalem, he will have to be a man of good standing amongst his people. And in verse 8 of the same chapter, chapter 8, we're told he's called the Prince of Judah. That means that he is of the family house of David. He is of the kingly line there. And so we find that this man's second name crops up in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Matthew. And we're told there that he forms part of the family of the house of David, and he's actually in the family line of Christ himself, the Prince of all princes of Judah. And so this man, first and foremost, is a Prince of Judah. He has tremendous standing amongst his people. He's a man of culture. He's a man of high standing amongst those that would know him well. He'll also have to be recognized by the ruling powers of his day. And so Cyrus, king of Persia, gives him a name or a title in chapter 5, verse 14, and it just calls him this, the governor. That's what he's called. He's called the governor. It's a recognized title, so that when he goes from border to border to border to get to his land of Judah, people will recognize his title, and so he'll have a standing amongst the rulers of his day and a standing amongst the people of his day. But what is his name? We don't know his name thus far, but in verse 8 it tells us. I wouldn't want a name like this. I always wanted a foreign name to have my name end in ich or kof or something like that, but it never was the case. And so his name is Sheshbazzar. Well, you could have thought of a better name, I'm sure. But Sheshbazzar. That's the name. Sheshbazzar, Prince of Judah. And though this man is of Jewish heritage, he can trace his line back to Abraham. He could actually prove it back to Abraham. Yet, as a captive in Babylon, he would also be given a Babylonian name. And so we found that with Daniel, didn't we? We found it with his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They are Babylonian names. They are not Hebrew names. And their Hebrew names are really quoted. And so we find with this man that he's been given a Babylonian name. His name means joy in affliction. Joy in affliction. Bible names help us to understand the nature sometimes of the character concerned. Jacob, when he was Jacob, his name means supplanter. You couldn't trust him as far as you could throw him. But when he met with God, his name was changed to Israel, a prince with God. Name change, because the nature is changed. And so we find with Peter in the New Testament, his Hebrew name, his Jewish name was Simeon. It means reed, flowing back and forth all the time with the wind. But when he's given his Greek name, he's called Peter, rock, stable, change of nature, see? Change of nature, change of plan, change of work. And so Sheshbazzar, his name initially means joy in affliction. This man is not dictated to by circumstance. He is able to see over the circumstance, the situation that surrounds him. He will have an encouraging spirit. He will be uplifting. He will be, in one sense, I think I put on the little note this morning regarding Andrew's quotations from Micah, who's speaking of similar things in the chapter that he looked at today. A modern day Barnabas, a son of encouragement. When this man comes around and he talks to those around him, this is the type of phrase that he will use. With God, we can do this. Now that's the man that's going to lead them out. Joy in affliction. That is not going to be dictated to even by the horizon that's in front of him. He's looking to see over it. And even in the midst of trials, there's that joy that rests deep within his heart. But then he goes on to say that he's got a second name. And I'm sure if I had a choice of a second name, I'd choose a better second name as well. When you read his second name. Because it gets a little bit confusing at times. Because one minute you read that Sheshbazzar in chapter 5 laid the foundation of the temple. But then we read in the book of Haggai that it wasn't Sheshbazzar, but it was a man called Zerubbabel or Zerubbabel, depending how you want to pronounce it. And that's his Hebrew name. And so we have his Babylonian name, now his Hebrew name. And his Hebrew name means stranger in Babylon. Well, what we have is a building up of the character that is going to lead these people. He's a man that has joy within his soul. Didn't Nehemiah say, the joy of the Lord is your strength? If my dad would have met Sheshbazzar, this is what he would have called him. Smiler. That's what he would have called him. Smiler. My dad used to lead a dog. You know, down Orchie's farm when he was doing a couple of operals down there, building a few sheds and whatever. Old Champion the dog or Rebel the Alsatian would come out to him. Or newborn Tiger. He was called a dog Tiger. Why on earth he called him that, I never know. But I remember up on the building site, at the top end of Penyrheol, when they were building the street that Zoe lives in, the very top street. I remember my dad was building there, and he took me up on a Saturday. And he saw someone, and he called them by the name because of what? Curly, he called him. Because he had wiry hair. How are you, Curly? What are you doing here? Smiler, he would have called Sheshbazzar. Always got that joy within him. But now a stranger in Babylon. All his life had been spent in the security and comfort and culture, lifestyle and beliefs of Babylon. Yet he was a stranger to it. It was, Jim Reeves used to sing that song, didn't he? This world is not my own. I'm just a passing through. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what shall I do? The angels beckon me. I can't remember and I won't call this world my home anymore. I remember I got so far then as well, didn't I? So Zerubbabel, he's a man who's a stranger in Babylon. Do you know, we see even in these two names a glimpse of our Lord Jesus. Joy in affliction, able to see above the circumstance. Listen to the Hebrew writer that says of Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising, belittling the shame, and is now sat down at the right hand of God. We see that he too had joy in affliction. But we find with him also, brought up all his life under Roman rule, dictated to in one sense by the customs and rules of his Jewish forefathers, of those rabbis that were living at that time. His life would have been dictated if they would have had it, but he would turn and say to Pilate and to those around him, but my kingdom is not of this world. I don't belong here. I'm going to another place. Now this is the character that Zerubbabel, Sheshbazzar, call him what you like. He was someone that had joy within his soul, that was able to encourage and uplift when the things would get hard and difficult, and he was someone who would make a clean break. I'm a stranger to Babylon. I'm not going to be held down by it. And so its life, its cultures, its belief means nothing to me. What a man to lead the people. And so we have this little picture of a church that is growing, that is volunteering, that has opened their hearts, and those supporting them have opened their hands. Even the king is looking to restore to them that which belonged rightly to them. And now a man stands forward that is called of God, in the midst of great difficulties will have joy, and yet never be held tied down to the culture and beliefs of Babylon. It's time to go, he would say. It says in the Psalms, in closing, I finished far with it and I anticipated. It says in the Psalms, in closing, when the writer of Psalm 126 penned it, he must have been one of those that was in the journey back from Babylon to Jerusalem. Because he said, when the Lord brought back the captivity from Zion, we were like those that dream. Our mouth was filled with laughter. I wonder if that joy was a little bit infectious. I wondered if it was. That hearts left the gates of Babylon, not quite sure what was coming round the next bend. But by the time they got to it, they were singing. I wondered if it was the spirit of joy that rested upon old Sheshbazzar as he led the people out. Our mouth was filled with laughter because of what God had done. And as they make their way, their songs continue. What a man to lead. What of the man that leads us today? Our Lord Jesus. Joy in the midst of affliction. And one who is a stranger to Babylon. He has no dealings with it at all. He is one that will allow us to make a clean break and be set free. And the joy that he has can be our joy as well. So that it gets infectious. That we become a happy church. When we say that sometimes, people immediately think, oh, happy clappy. But a happy church. A church with joy deep within its soul. May God grant it to be so, that in these days we might know our leader, the Christ of God, to be the one that will lead us ever onward.